Evening, everyone. I am Joe Barnes, co-chair of the CPC, and welcome to our January 10th, 2024 Community Preservation Committee meeting. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
First, I'd like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Maureen Callahan.
Aye.
Reg Foster.
Here.
Jim Rosenbaum.
Here.
Dave Hera.
Here.
Jean McKnight.
Here.
And Joe Barnes, the chair, says aye as well. Our administrative staff, welcome to Cecilia Simchak.
Hello.
And our first guest tonight will be Ed Olson, Superintendent of Park and Forestry, which we will get to shortly. This meeting is being convened at the town hall, both live and on Zoom. We ask you to please be aware of that. Anything that is said can and will be recorded. We have distributed materials to our staff members and our committee members to support the information tonight. Just a reminder that I will introduce speakers. It would be well if people could raise their hand and be identified before they jump into the conversation. Mute your phone, please, or computer when you're not speaking. And for any response, please wait till the chair yields to you. First item on the agenda. We have the introduction. Any updates? I have nothing to add other than what's on the agenda for tonight. So we will proceed with our first presentation, FY25-03, the DeFazio Complex Fencing Improvements. And once again, we welcome Ed Olson. Ed, welcome to CPC.
Thank you.
No stranger are you to CPC.
Not at all. Good evening. And thank you for having me tonight. And thank you for supporting me all these years. As you mentioned, Joe, several of our town projects have come through CPC, and I've been kind of the beneficiary of the Parks and Rec to have worked on so many worthwhile projects that have been funded through CPC monies for open space preservation, including which were 3 projects that we recently finished that were funded by CPC, and those were being the resurfacing of the running track at DeFazio. Thank you for that funding and support, and that project came out beautiful. And just in the nick of time, as we talked about when we presented that, we kind of pushed that away a little bit, but we kind of hit that one right at the sweet spot, and it looks beautiful over there. The other one being Town Common renovation. So I thank you for your support. I hope you all like the new Town Common. I know it's kind of had some mixed reviews, but I think it's a wonderful, beautiful space. And I tell you, for $1.3 million, I don't think we could find a better value for what we just did to that space. When I look back at the photos of the old Town Common, with the cracked walkways and the puddled walkways and the trees that were misplaced and mismatched, we did the best we could for a long time. But I'll tell you, that spatial orientation is only going to get better as time goes on. So I hope that, and I thank you for your support for that. And then lastly was the McLeod Field project. Like you said, Joe, we're here a lot to CPC, so thank you for the support on that project. That project, like many of my projects, start as simple projects and they get bigger and bigger. So that project was really the driving force was the drainage factor. At a 4-foot storm drain that was failed in the field. And we had visions of things on the field that we wanted to do with different groups and support Park and Rec, but really we needed to fix that drain before we could do anything, and we had a lot of reservation about that. There was a massive drain line that took a lot of stormwater, so checking that box off and then finishing off the field and supporting the girls softball program, that was an amazing triple win for the whole community. And I think it again supports the theme of most of our projects, open space preservation, and really, as you know, and Jean knows, Joe, is I take that responsibility very seriously of being a shepherd of these town lands and providing for the town taxpayers and making sure things look beautiful and safe and accessible. So I thank you all. Tonight, unfortunately, I'm not here for such a, pardon my French, a sexy project. This is really a pretty simple project, but once again, the theme is protecting a town asset. when I used to kind of sales pitch the town common, and I wasn't lying, I said I considered the town's front yard. Well, I consider DeFazio, I guess, our backyard. I don't think there's another piece of land territory in the town of Needham that's more used by the townspeople than DeFazio. Baseball, softball, soccer, lacrosse, high school athletics, park and rec, all the youth sporting groups, all our varsity and JV programs, all the way down to the freshman level. Charles River Rock during the day, as we saw. There's so many different aspects of that field complex that means so much to all of us. And as I mentioned earlier, the McLeod Field project, the McLeod being transformed into a premier softball field was really the icing on the cake to bring the girls into that piece of the pie and share the wealth there for all of us. In addition to that, the drain fixing, the accessibility tie-ins that we did there in that project were kind of the other final pieces. Well, I guess not final pieces, because here I am tonight. I guess the final pieces are really the fencing. So when I talk about fencing, we're talking about all the fencing. When we talk about DeFazio, I've been with the town 13 and a half years now. I can't believe I'm saying that, but, and I do feel old when I say that, but I came on after the Field of Dreams project. In fact, I never forget the first day at work. I got a tour from Bob Lewis, our president. Back then, he was the assistant director. He took me around town for a couple hours, showed me everything, gave me a crash course, threw me a stack of keys. There were like 400 keys. And he said, oh, by the way, there's a field with a massive sinkhole at the phase, and you got to fix it quick. They're dependent upon you. You're a turf grass guy. Let's go. Because you get 2 weeks to fix it. And I said, holy smokes. I said, this field's new and you get a failure. But I realized that the town had been gifted that project. Millions and millions of dollars were raised, fundraised by good spokes of the community that really cared, that wanted to elevate our programs. At that time, we really were struggling with fields everywhere. We had muddy fields, and people rallied to actually gift the town that Field of Dreams project. So I'm here tonight to support that legacy and ask that we repair the fence that's there. People will go, you know, it doesn't look too bad. Well, 13 and a half years, same fence. We're now over 15 years, same fence. Fencing has a useful life. And it's kind of like what the track conversation, when I talked about resurfacing the track, I said the track is going to fail 15 years from now. You're going to get 30 years because it's like a road base. The top coat was like a seal coat, like we did with the resurfacing, that protected that asset. Soon the bottom will fail. Well, fencing is much like that. The fencing is encased in concrete and post. We're going to save all that. Those foundations are good. It's the fabric. It's the hardware. It's the gates. It's the security gates. So it's basically giving the whole complex a facelift, not a complete renovation, but almost a remodeling. And why? 3 things I call out. It's security. Like I mentioned, we've invested a lot of money in those fields right now, and I dare say this online with the open public, but right now we're kind of left exposed a little bit. We don't have the best, most secure access and exit egresses out there. We've made improvements at other fields, but that one is still kind of open. And I say that because we've seen damage to our fields. We've seen people go out in vehicles and do donuts and they take off, and that's a reality. So security is my top concern. Second would be, and I want to be honest with, is aesthetics. A lot of the fabric is curled, it's bent, the hardware is buckling now. And the coating of the fencing is actually peeling, as we saw when we did a site visit. It's easily peeled, and a lot of people are out there. And I don't want to see someone peel that paint and maybe potentially put it in their mouth. And the third part, I think, is in my PowerPoint, and I kind of forget the third part. And forgive me, it's been a long week. I
can pull it up too.
Yeah, thanks, Cecilia.
Let me hit share. All right, there you go.
And I'm going through right now, and I don't call out my third point, so forgive me for losing track of that mind thought there, but as you can see from the PowerPoint, you know, our primary goal protect the investments of the park. As I mentioned, the field is now approaching 16 years old and it's showing signs of age. We've done our best to do the best topically on all the surfaces. I think you can all see that when you go there. But again, this is kind of the last piece of this puzzle that we're trying to fix. As I mentioned, the Field of Dreams was a gifted project to the town, and my team is Park and Rec and Parks and Forestry. It's a combined project in the town of Needham. Really, this is for all of us. As I mentioned, this field is not only used by the town, by the high school athletes, but it's used by the community at large. So, with that said, I would entertain any questions and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ed. Committee members, questions, comments? Dave?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't notice that there was any scope of work or cost estimate in the presentation materials we had, so I was just wondering, I know it's not rocket science, but like, I was just wondering how many linear feet of fencing you were dealing with, how many gates or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for pointing that out. It's not in the PowerPoint, but we do have a written estimate from our on-call fencing company. The town has a lot of on-call vendors, so Argus Constructions are on call, and he has gone through and given us a detailed proposal that supports the budget request. But thank you, I can include that. Good question. In that proposal, it's broken out parking lot backstop, and it tells you all the linear feet, the gauge, and kind of the cost associated.
Ed, you mentioned the construction firm. This project gone out to bid? Does it go out to bid?
So right now, we're talking about the funding, but if we were granted the funding, we would actually put out this project out to bid because the scope is so large that I don't believe we'd want to use, and I don't want to speak for our assistant head of finance right now, but I do believe because of the scope and the magnitude of the cost that we couldn't use our on-call vendor, that we put a spec together. We'd probably use their spec and put it out for all to bid on it, so it'd be even.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate the 417,000 that is in the proposal to be fairly accurate?
I do, Joe.
Yeah.
To the best of my knowledge of fencing, I think it is accurate. We've done several backstop replacement jobs in similar, like different fields. And I think the numbers didn't match up pretty well, so I am confident in that number.
Typically, our on-call vendors, when we put out an on-call contractor, their hourly pricing is a little bit higher because they're agreeing to an hourly price for any sort of type of work under that, where would be a very specific project that they know they would have to competitively bid. So the pricing tends to come in pretty competitive.
If not lower.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, what are on-call vendors?
Sure, so I'll give it for instance, so we mentioned our fencing on call, so if the town were to have like, in years past, we've had vehicular damage, a UPS truck goes off the road and takes out the cricket fence. So we have a bid and a contract vessel that's already been approved through the town, that any department, my department, any department in town could make a call to the vendor. I have this incident, I need a quote, and I need a quick response, and they have to respond according to the terms that we set. Respond within 7 days for an emergency. So it just gives us a quick vessel to procure services of any kind. And it's something we've worked hard at for a lot of things. Goose services, we actually have an on-call for dog chasing, for all these different things, everything you can imagine. It's amazing, and it's really a testimony to Cecilia, Karis, Dave, but we try to really cover all bases. And you think I have a lot of on-calls, you should see building maintenance. You're the king of on-call. So that's an on-call.
So does that mean that we're just checking that one vendor? We're just assuming we're gonna use that one vendor? Do we have?
No, that's a good question. So to develop a proposal, a budget proposal, it's the easiest way to say, this is the scope we're looking for. Leo, can you give me a hand and price this out? Sorry, Leo, this job isn't gonna go to you as an on-call, but it's a heads up already for them to be ready for that bid and maybe have a leg up on competition. So they have a vested interest to say, we want this job, here's a detailed quote. We know we might not get it. Thank you for the opportunity to come out and give you the proposal. Good question, though. And like I said, I do believe that detailed quote will be, in reality, would be a lot less, because when it's out there, Argus is gonna be worried about Premier, Steelco, and all these other vendors. So 400 might go down to 350. So I don't expect it would be more, to answer the question. I would expect it to be less. However, it's good to have that cushion, as we know, in the public sector, you never know.
Okay, Gene,
Yes, you mentioned the estimate from the fencing company, Argus Construction Corporation, that's you mean that provide. So that's the only role for Argus Construction at this point, because you said it would go out to bid. So in answer to question 1B, list the names and addresses of project architects, contractors, and consultants. I guess you might call them a consultant.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I would agree.
I didn't, I printed everything out and I somehow missed the estimate. Did other people get it? Joe, did you get it, the estimate?
I didn't get it.
I
No.
saw 417 and some,
417.
yeah, I don't know where I saw
No,
it.
No, but the
excuse me.
breakdown.
Oh, the
no.
breakdown, I didn't know to get a
Yeah,
breakdown.
I thought we,
No, I just
I
talked
just-
about that,
yeah.
saying,
He would get that.
doesn't have that
Yeah, we
included
just
yet.
asked that
Yeah.
question.
No, it's not there yet.
No.
Yeah. And so I have a few questions. I went over the follow-up questions and I thought that would be provided with some kind of sketch plan. I think it was me who added that where it said design specifications, landscape architectural plans, and a sketch plan is good enough. But something that shows the site, the location of the fences, what is it we're going to be doing? And I think we need that to feel as though we have an idea of what the project entails. There must be some sort of plan you already have that would show the fences.
Yeah, I can work on that. I mean, I could take a Google Earth picture and then actually relate it back to the quote with different colors and kind of highlight. So that's doable. That's fair.
I think, something that
Of course, I think
shows,
that's a good
you know,
idea. So
shows the
we
fences.
could use that and represent the quote.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, okay, so, the budget, as you said, I put a question mark because it said it's included and we didn't see it, but we'll get that, later. Now, on page 2 of the follow-up questions, provide the deed and recorded plans and evidence of what town agency or board, and there's no answer given to this at all. My understanding, and the reason I asked that question, and I think it's a typical one that we ask too, is my understanding is that DeFazio is divided in its control. The application was the part of the DPW Park and Rec, but I believe part of that property is under the jurisdiction of the school committee.
That's correct.
So I think, the application, we should have something in writing from the school committee that they are in support of this project on the land that's under their jurisdiction. And that's why I asked that question. I think there should be some evidence of their support for the project, the school committee.
I think that's fair. And I think, if you'd like additional support from the high school athletics, Ryan, the new athletic director, is in full support. So let me try to work on getting some written letters of support. from
But yeah, just, but particularly just,
the school
since the
committee.
land is under their control, just, they can do a quick vote at a meeting and say we support it
That's
and
good.
put something in writing. Yeah, I agree, we don't really need environmental assessment reports. There's no zoning restrictions and use regulations applicable to the project. I mean, you can write down what zoning districts it's in, but it's a public project, so it's an exempt project. Well, no, I don't say, actually, in Needham, many towns have public projects as exempt from local zoning. Needham does not.
We do not.
No,
I
for
wish
sure,
we
for
did.
sure. I learned that
We
over
certainly
the
do
years.
not. Believe me.
But a project
I know
like,
that from McLeod, and I had to go to every
yeah,
jurisdiction and board and committee in town for that.
but a project like this, it's
It's a
not a
replacement.
building,
It's a
it's just
replacement.
fences.
Yeah, I
So it's hard to imagine that there'd be any zoning issue, but there was no answer provided at all, so. So I've got check marks and almost everything, so let's see. Oh yeah, again, the applicant is site control or written consent that you're gonna take care of. And on explain how the project addresses recreational factors for consideration. On the final bullet point on that list on page 4, where it says develops active recreation resources, including playing fields. Maybe the word develops is what, I say, oh no, we're not developing, but it says not applicable. And I think it's improved. It seems to me to say that's not applicable is not the correct answer. Do others who have more experience on community preservation think that this is a project that develops or improves playgrounds? Because that's one of the things in the list, it improves the playground.
Seems more like maintenance than improvement.
Yeah, and security, maintenance, I don't know about proving.
Well, then how is it? I know we got town council approval that says it's fundable, but under what? I haven't seen any letter. Was there written communication from town council?
Yes, I believe I forwarded it along.
Yeah.
Yeah, last one.
Yeah,
Okay,
he commented on all 3 projects.
Yeah,
yeah. Well, maybe I'll just take another look myself and see what category it was under as
Was it rehabilitation? Was that word used by Chris Heap?
I'm sorry, Joe, yeah.
For the rehabilitation of land for recreational use.
Yeah.
okay, then maybe that should be mentioned because that is not listed in the recreation factors for consideration in the follow-up questions. Okay, I think that's, yeah. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Thank you.
Great,
I
thank you.
have one more question, if that's okay.
Laura?
Is there a safety consideration here,
Yes,
component to this?
thank you, that was my 3rd point of my bullet,
Oh,
so
okay.
security, safety, and aesthetics, right, and, yeah, so safety, as Jean, Joe, and I, and Stacy all walk the property, I mentioned the paint that peels, so, I think it's a minimal safety consideration, but I hate to see, I just think about myself and my kids, when the kids were growing up, and we had Needham Track Club on the summertime, there's hundreds of kids and parents that are leaning on that fence that is literally peeling apart in your hands, so I think there's a little risk there, and I think, as well as Chris knows better than anybody, being a Little League guy, the backstops are curled, so if a kid were to slide into one of those curled fencing pieces, I do think there are some safety implications to that old fence curled and broken in spots, as we saw, it's ripped, the fabric's ripped in a couple spots, so I don't think it's a major, someone's gonna get hurt there, but yeah, someone could get cut. I think that paint that's peeling is probably not a good thing for the kids to be around, and definitely, I think some of those backstops are in really poor condition. So thank you for bringing that out of my poor memory. Thank you.
and there's no additional fencing, just replacement of what's
Yep.
already there.
Yeah, just kind of taking that complete asset from the Field of Dreams and giving it a facelift, like the whole property. I know it's a lot of money. As I mentioned before, we've done some backstop replacements in other fields, and it's costly. As I pointed out on our field trip, the other thing is you live and learn. So in this project, one of the things we saw at the backstops is there's different gauge wires that's used. In this project, they use 6 gauge, and the mesh was the spacing's wide. So we're gonna tighten up some of the spacing. We're gonna improve the gauge of the wire, because the heavier the wire, the less the, as we call it, pitchback effect. When the kids are smashing the ball into the fence, that 6 gauge just curls real easy. So we're gonna live and learn and try to do better on this next generation.
And any discussion about this project being funded through the town alone and not CPC?
I'm not privy to any
You
of
didn't
those.
bring anything to the powers that be about that?
I always bring everything to the table, and then kind of, we're all told where it kind of ends up, so. I don't know if I'm evading that question, but
I have an answer, and I went and looked at the capital plan that went
Yes.
for the select board 2025, and you are on it. It's a priority one, recommendation for $417,000. I don't know if it makes the cut or not, but it was in the packet the other day that went to the select board.
Does that mean that becomes a priority for the town to do the funding rather than CPC?
No, if you read through the capital plan, it indicates that the 417,000 for the fencing is contingent on CPC funding.
Okay.
It's a subject to CPC approval, yes.
Something that drives the question, Ed, is the fact that we only have 3 projects this year. Yours is minuscule compared to the other 2. The funding is not as great from the state this year as it has been in the past, so it's gonna be tight, and we have to take a look at, what we're able to do, to what extent we're able to do it. So it's gonna be a question we're gonna ask of everybody that comes before us, I think.
Completely understand, and like I said, I'm forever grateful to CPC in my lifetime for all the projects that we funded and completed, so thank you for your consideration.
Okay.
I have a question that
Rich?
is either for Dave or you, which is, one of the answers here, question 3C, provide details of any natural resource limitations, wetlands, floodplain, et cetera, to which the project is subject. And the answer was DeFazio Field has 2 wetland resources. One is on the perimeter of the ASA small field, and the other one is at the edge of the McLeod field. Are there any, would you have to get an order of conditions or anything, or is that you're outside of the buffer zone?
We're not outside the buffer zone,
Mhm.
but this is a pre-existing fence, and we could do what we call a request for determination of applicability. I do believe, Regs, it's a good question, but this would fall under a general maintenance permit for the DPW.
Okay.
But that is a good question, and there are 2 wetlands that we are within the buffer zone.
Gene?
Yeah, I was just looking at the materials that we got at the meeting where town council's opinion was on the agenda, but there wasn't anything in writing given to us by town council. Is that right? There's nothing in the agenda packet that I have.
On the eligibility,
Yeah,
I know there was an email that was forwarded along,
an email that
Probably
was
at least a
forwarded to
week.
members.
yes,
Yeah.
it was forwarded to all CPC
And it
members.
included all 3 projects and his
Yeah.
findings or his,
Okay.
But the write-up on the first one, which was the housing authority, with a few paragraphs, and then they got shorter and shorter, so it might have just gotten buried at the bottom of the email.
My recollection, I may be mistaken, if nobody over here remembers, is I asked for a copy of it and Lauren forwarded it to me, but it wasn't me and everybody else. So they may, if they don't remember getting it, it may have, Lauren,
Yeah, I
We
don't-
got it.
I
you
remember
did get
reading
it, okay.
yeah.
all right.
Yes, we did.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll have to look back. I didn't print it out. so- Okay,
Anyone else for Mr. Olson?
I just have a comment. I was riding by the Fazio the other day, and I took a look at the new project there, McLeod. It looks really nice, and I was surprised on how quickly you got that done, so.
Yeah, you say it quickly, I feel like it aged me, but.
I know, but
We're not done yet, but thank you, Dave.
yeah, and I mean, that pipe must have got a lot of use in the past.
Oh my goodness,
few
yeah,
days,
we
'cause-
really lucked out with that pipe because we
Yeah.
were really worried about, I mean, we did reinforced concrete because we had problems, the other one floating. And this one's never gonna float, but we really lucked out with the timing of the schedule in the summer because it was a wet year. And we hit it like in 5 days and we got that whole thing in, and right afterwards, we got that massive storm, so we really lucked out because it could have been a disaster out there, so somehow,
No,
once in a
not,
while,
not,
the stars in alignment and things go well.
not a
so-
disaster,
But thank
a
you.
lot of pumping, maybe.
Yeah, dewatering and, yeah, it would have been a lot more difficult. So we got lucky.
Well, when Gene and I did the tour with you, we've got an up-close look, and you do, of the track, which
Beautiful.
came out beautifully, right, so.
It's a beautiful spot, and like I said, I
Took a while to get that surface redone, but
yeah, it came out nice.
came out well, yeah.
The
It'd
whole
be
place
great
looks great.
if we could get some photos of some of these projects and put them on our page and just to show people like what the result
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
votes were.
Good
for
idea.
What I
some of
was
these things.
hoping to do is do like sandwich boards for town meeting. I usually kind of harken back to CPC when the votes were and then show some of the, because and just say thank you. And
Yeah,
as town meeting members come in, but that's a great idea and we can work on that.
More to
That's a
just
great idea.
educate people
Yeah.
that the money really
Mhm.
does go somewhere and things really do get done.
And think of the
Yeah.
things we've done over the years. I mean, if we'd done that for all these projects, we would have had quite a picture portfolio.
Mm.
No reason why we can't go back in time for some of the other projects like Union Eastman Reservoir. Great idea.
Just to piggyback what Laura's saying, I've been beating this to death for years, but I think CPC really deserves to have some type of acknowledgement. And I showed Peter a few years ago what Wellesley did. They've got a plaque on the track, not the track, the walking path. And they acknowledge the fact that this is through the CPC, the town's money, that would like to have that on everything that happens.
Yeah, I don't know if we saw the plaque for the town common that kind of recognizes everybody and CPC's up list on that, I hope, or I believe they are, so. And you're right, Joe, I
Yeah.
think, I don't know about the fencing project, maybe we can put a little
Well, yeah.
plaque on one of the posts, but you're right, I mean, and I think that we should have a ribbon cutting for McLeod in the spring and have a gathering with CPC and others. I think that we should celebrate these wins, so it's a good idea.
Great.
Got my support.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we need a plaque for the fencing.
Just keep my name off the
Just
plaque.
something on top of one of the fence poles, you know.
Carve it into
Cap.
one of them.
Yeah.
That's right, that's right. Okay, anyone else before we allow Mr. Olson to leave? Ed, thank you. Well done as usual.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Nice to see
You're
you.
very welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, everyone. Good questions. Laura, you want to add anything, or you okay?
No,
You feeling all right?
I'm good. I was away with a lot of people at a wedding, so I'm just being cautious.
Didn't want to bring the wedding back, huh?
No, I do, but not in the way that,
Okay.
yeah, not in the
All right.
COVID way.
Looks like Stacy is on
Sorry
deck
for
here,
being
huh?
late, by the way.
So now we have FY 2025 high school tennis court construction. Everyone has materials describing the project. This is a request for $2.6 million, correct, Stacy?
That's correct.
Okay. Before we get into your presentation, I wanted to say that I did go back to the previous project application you made, the request for $50,000, which we did approve. It was either going to be between 500,000 and 1.5 million, depending on whether it was going to be a resurfacing of 4 courts or it's going to be more heavy duty renovation, digging down, because you just couldn't resurface, you had to do more in the construction bit. So this is a bit of a change from the initial application. It's now another at least $1.1 million more than the higher quote, and we've got 4 additional courts. So hopefully you can explain the reasoning behind the change. I think you probably will do that. So anyway, we'll turn it over to you. Welcome to CPC.
Thank you. Cecilia, I'm wondering if John from Activitas is in the waiting room or,
Jonathan Charwick?
Yep.
Yep, I can bring him in.
So he's gonna be running most of the presentation. I'm here for questions only because the Wi-Fi up here is very spotty and there's a storm currently happening outside my window. So,
I can also bring Ben from Activitas as well.
perfect. Thank you.
Oh, doesn't want to be
So I'm gonna turn it over to Jonathan to run through the presentation real quick, and then if there are any other outstanding questions or questions along the way, I'm certainly happy to help answer them. And if I lose you, I'll try to hop back on.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. As Stacy mentioned, my name is Jonathan Charwick. I'm an associate principal and registered landscape architect for Activitas. Our office is right next door to Needham in the town of Dedham, and it's been great working with the town so far. So a brief presentation this evening. I'll walk through the existing conditions of the tennis court facility at the high school, what the proposed site plan looks like for the proposed improvements. We'll talk about the opinion of probable project costs that is actually a little bit less than that 2.6 that was mentioned. We'll talk about A lot of the items included in that, and then I can go over any questions, discussions, and comments anyone has. And by all means, this is a presentation, but please interrupt if there's any questions as I'm walking through anything in real time. All right, so to familiarize everyone with the project site, this is at the high school. There are 4 existing tennis courts in the northern corner of the facility, adjacent to the school and the parking lot up in that northeast corner. And then there's a large natural grass field area just adjacent to the courts as well. 4 existing courts, generally good size for those courts. They are a little bit close to each other, spatially the one next to the second one. So as part of the improvements, we're going to get a little bit more space for those courts, but it is important to note we have a close property line right adjacent to the project area. There's a 25-foot rear and side yard setback in over there. So with the new courts and the new improvements, we're going to stay outside of that setback. And the existing courts, we're generally keeping the existing footprints. So we're trying to respect the neighbors as best as possible. So this slide here is the proposed site plan. As I mentioned, so we'll start with the 4 existing courts. So the courts closest to the neighbors, those are going to be renovated in kind. At this point, we're assuming it's a full reconstruction. Right now, the asphalt has been down probably for about 10, 15 years or so. Stacy might be able to correct me on that, the age. But at this point, there's been some cracking, some heaving, and as you were discussing in the previous application, sort of those courts have meet their useful life at this point. So any type of crack repair and resurfacing in kind really wouldn't be good money spent on this project. Unfortunately, a full reconstruction, whether we do asphalt or post-tension concrete, is really the recommendation for those existing courts. As it relates to expanding into an 8-court facility, for high school events, usually 5 courts are usually what's recommended in order to do doubles and have efficient matches. So having the 4 courts there makes it difficult for their home matches. And I believe they don't typically play their home matches at the high school for that reason. And speaking with Park and Rec, the school athletic director, and some of the other stakeholders, the goal really is to try to get 8 courts here as best as possible. Now, if it became a financial situation that we had to try to reduce, we certainly could look at 6 courts versus 8. We could looking at phasing as well. But as you folks know, phasing any type of project, typically it might be cheaper to break it out over time. But in the grand scheme of things, it's usually going to be a more expensive effort. So if we can put this one project together as one whole project, it'll be the most cost-effective way to handle the improvements. As it relates to other amenities around the courts, we will be providing handicap accessible walkways to all the courts. So all 8 courts will have full handicap accessibility. We'll be putting chain link fencing around the existing courts, matching the 12-foot high fencing that exists at the existing courts today. There'll be some areas for spectator seating. We're not anticipating any large bleachers, really, parents that can either queue and stand and watch the games or can bring lawn chairs. There is a slight retaining wall or seat wall between the existing court, the upper left corner, and some of the new courts. That's really to retain some grade. So it's a nice place to have a nice little seat wall that people can use that for seating as well. And then in addition to that, there's a large, this orange space sort of centrally located between all the courts. The town currently owns an existing shade structure that was meant for a previous project that wasn't able to be installed, and Stacy may be able to elaborate on that. So we're going to be able to take that from the town, install as part of this project. We'll be able to allow some shade during the spring and summer seasons when those courts get used the most. Before I go on to anything else, Stacy, do you want to add anything on the design?
I just want to say that the commission is in full support of this particular option. They did vote at their meeting Monday night in support of this particular option. And yes, the shade structure was originally purchased for a school playground. It was too large for the space, and so it's been sitting in storage, and we are trying to reuse it in this space here.
I missed, what commission approved it?
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec.
There were 3 or 4 different designs.
Okay,
And that one, the additional 4 courts don't go over any of the setbacks.
Yeah, that's important. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's an important piece to note. So, based on the fact that the school currently has a special permit, we will be required to go to the planning board to make an amendment for the improvements that we're proposing here, along with full stormwater management for the increase in impervious surfacing. What a key point we were trying to do is keep out that 25-foot buffer for a few reasons. Obviously, one, to be good neighbors to the adjacent neighbors. So the more space we can provide between the courts and those other properties, the better. And also from a regulatory and a permitting standpoint, the amendment hopefully will be a little bit easier to achieve by staying outside of that 25-foot rear and side yard setback. The existing courts currently exist in that setback, so the portion of the courts that exist now will remain, but we are not shifting the courts any closer to those neighbors page north. So basically, where the existing fencing is now, that's where the existing fence will be in the future, and all the improvements will sort of move south toward the school parking lot. And to talk a little bit about the cost estimate for the proposed project. So with the full mobilization site preparation of the site, so that includes, demolishing the existing tennis courts, stripping the topsoil that needs to be removed to build the courts. Earthwork and drainage improvements, like I noted, will be required to provide new drainage improvements for the increase in impervious surfacing, along with just general site improvements related to the grading and the operations of the proposed project. Renovating the tennis courts, number 3. The base bid of the project right now assumes asphalt tennis courts. I'll talk about the potential to do post-tension in one moment. So we have the renovated tennis courts for about $338,000. That's the tennis courts that exist now. The new 4 tennis courts around $402,000. And then line item number 5 is landscape improvements. So that's the earthwork, the re-loaming and seeding of areas that are disturbed during construction, things like that. So subtotal of just under $1 million. When we look at, the percentages for general conditions, contractor overhead and profit, and we've assumed a 4% escalation for 2024 because these estimates began about 3 or 4 months ago. So we've assumed some of the cost estimates we were looking at a few months ago. There'll be some escalation for 2024. The construction subtotal for this project is about $1.186 million. As of right now, we're holding about a 20% construction design contingency. Part of that is we haven't done full stormwater management design yet, and we are going to be meeting with the town engineer in about a week and a half to review the project. And we do know there are some drainage issues we need to address as it relates to downhill. So we need to meet with the town engineer to do a full design. We assume some of that design will take some of that project contingency. Plus, with the volatility of the marketplace over the last few years, again, until we do a final design, a 20% contingency, even though it's a heavy number, is something we're really telling a lot of our clients to hold right now, just because we're not sure what the bidding climate is going to look like in this 2024 yet. And then there's a soft cost for construction administration. So our current contract with the town is just through bidding. So assuming this project proceeds, the soft costs cover, the amount of a fee for the scope that would take for us to be on site to manage the construction project, make sure the contractor is building per the plans and specifications. So that project total that we just discussed, the preliminary opinion of probable project cost is about $1.5 million. And that assumes that all 8 courts are made of asphalt. We're also showing 2 additional costs, and add alternate 1 for post-tension concrete, which is generally just about $1 million in premium to that 1.5. And then add alternate 2 would be if we lit 4 of the 8 courts for sports lighting, and that's around $300,000. We want to talk a little bit about the post-tension concrete. So in the New England area, because of the freeze-thaw cycles and the type of asphalt we get, over the last, I'd say, several years, so the wear and tear of asphalt and just the condition and type of asphalt we get isn't what it was 10, 15 years ago. When I was talking to a client 10 or 15, 20 years ago, we would say you get about 25 or so years of life out of asphalt, and then you got to repave. Unfortunately, now, because of the quality of asphalt, the quality of oil we get with those courts, we're looking at about 10 to 15 years. And there's a lot more maintenance required with the asphalt because once you start getting cracking, we need to keep up with those repairs. And there's a lot more maintenance associated. Post-tension concrete essentially is like concrete decks you would see in a parking garage. So it's a 4 or 5 inch slab concrete. They're put together with a series of gridded tension wires that essentially when they pour the concrete, they tension, pull it together so it alleviates any cracking and any issues of settlement such that you may see with asphalt. Typically, this post tension was really used for sites that had poor soils. So if you had soils that shrunk and you had, issues of settlement and things like that, post tension work was typically used. Now we are seeing a trend, even though with the premium cost over the last 5 or 6 years of clients seeing the value of using post tension in the lifespan, which is closer to 25, 30 years, where you're paying a premium, but over the life cycle of the project, it actually may be less expensive. Certain towns such as Weymouth, Lexington, we've been starting to do more post-tension. The cost of post-tension has also started to decrease again as the number of post-tension courts in the public realm have increased. And then as far as add alternate number 2, when we were asked for a scope of work, one of the things that we were asked to look at was the possibility of doing some lighting on some of these courts. So we provide some pricing, but obviously, the discussion of lighting these courts with the adjacent neighbors is, something that probably needs to be discussed. Stacy, do you maybe want to elaborate on that one a little bit?
Yeah, so when we brought this project to the public, one of the questions that the tennis community wanted to know was what could we light these courts? So we promised that we would look into the cost of at least some of the courts. In discussions with the schools and looking at the documentation, with the neighbors being so close, it is highly unlikely, but we did want to look into the costs as part of this design project.
Yeah, and for fairly short money, if we thought down the road at some point lights made some sense, as part of this project, we can put in some spare conduits around the facility, so at least there's some infrastructure in there. Conduits fairly cheap to put in the ground, especially with all the earthwork we're going to do. So that may make sense. At least you have the conduits and the runways in the ground, so that in the future, lighting would be a little bit easier, and then we could look at it down the road. But big picture with the project potentially including the post-tension concrete, right now we're about 2.55 million, so a little bit less than that 2.6 that was originally submitted. As we've developed the design a little bit, we've seen some efficiencies and learned a little bit more, so that's why that budget's gone down slightly. But I believe Stacy's in support of post-tension concrete if it's possible. I do think in grand scheme of things, even though it is such a premium on the project, long-term it does make a lot of sense. But obviously it's a financial decision to weigh depending on what other things are coming in front of the committee. So at that point, that finished my portion of the presentation. So I'll go back to the site plan. I'm more than willing to review any questions or comments anyone has about the design, about the cost opinion, or any other questions related to the courts.
Committee? Jim?
Oh, yeah, I got 2 questions. One, I don't think we have the latest version of the presentation or the estimate, so I think if we could get that, that would be good. My second question is, I didn't understand the life cycle cost analysis that was the last page of the presentation. It almost looked like the post-tension concrete alternative was had a higher life cycle cost than the asphalt, when one would expect it the other way around, which would be in part the justification for doing the post-tension concrete. So I tried to play around with the numbers, but I couldn't get them to work. So maybe that was just a draft and
So that's the updated draft there, January 10th draft.
Yeah, but if you look here,
I know,
okay, it's like,
I circled the same thing.
if the average annual cost is, say, 79,000 for asphalt, and it's 118,000 for the PT concrete, that doesn't make sense to me. I would expect it to be the other way around.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
can-
it go ahead. No, Stacy,
Good,
go ahead.
John.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so John and Activitas ran the numbers for 25 years. That's the actual warranty for the post-tension concrete. But it's not necessarily the lifespan. So, because these haven't been around as far as tennis courts, more than 50 years, we're not really sure what the actual lifespan is. But the guarantee that it will last 25 years, is where John and his team ran the numbers. So any years over that, we will save significant money. And if we get to the 25, the 30, even the 35 years, then the cost savings is going to be tenfold.
All right, so just to restate that, are you saying that the life cycle cost of the PT concrete alternative is higher than the asphalt alternative?
For 25 years.
Yeah.
Yes, and I
Correct.
think, I think also, John, I don't know
Well,
if you have that
I
slide,
would
but
I would go back and take a closer look at that.
But isn't that, but you're also talking the quality. I use the tennis courts and once they start cracking, the town isn't very good with maintenance. This doesn't need the same kind of maintenance
Well, I mean,
and care.
I think that's a separate issue, but, I'm just looking at, you're estimating what the life cycle cost is, and that assumes that there's gonna be reconditioning, every, I don't know, 7 to 10.
No, they said they're not gonna need reconditioning.
No, I'm
They
talking
might-
about the asphalt,
The asphalt, yeah.
yeah, so.
it'll need a complete renovation. It would need a capital project every 7 to 15 years, depending on the cracking and the quality of the asphalt.
Right, and that's reflected in your cost of $1.38 million. I understand that, but now you have this better system that's gonna last 25 years, and you have almost identical number for repair replacement over that 25-year span. That plus the increased capital cost makes it much more expensive on a life cycle basis.
May I
Which-
add a
Which
question?
I don't think is the true answer. Everything I've read is the life cycle cost of a PT concrete tennis court is less than asphalt. And that's one of the justifications for going to asphalt. Going to concrete. So
May
I'm
I,
just saying that,
may I just piggyback a question? I think it would be great to have it go back and looked at rather than, maybe there's a mistake in the
Yeah.
calculation. And see the actual spreadsheet. But the other thing I wrote down here, while I noticed the same thing is this a net present value calculation of the 25-year cost? Or is this, you don't factor that in? And if it is a net present value, what hurdle rate do you use for the calculation? Because where you get sort of, kind of misled is if, when you lay out more money in year 1, as opposed to money in year 7 or year, 15, there's also an inflationary cost. Obviously, every time you have to resurface the asphalt, it costs more. And I just would like to ask for some details on how that calculation is made.
Sure, so,
I would just like to add that I think this is a very important issue with regard to a decision between asphalt and concrete.
Okay. For those who are not familiar with terminology, is post-tension concrete, is it not only the composition of the material, or is it also the depth that maybe the foundation is created? Completely different than the asphalt?
It's a few things, yes. So the asphalt concrete, it's asphalt courts are about 3-inch profile. So very, very similar to a parking lot or a sidewalk. You have, 2 layers. Typically you have a 2-inch binder and a 1-inch top surface. So 3 inches of asphalt. And then you're going to surface the court just like you would at any of the other courts. The post-tension concrete, typically it's about a 4 to 5 inch depth slab. So there's about 2 more inches of depth to that slab. And the reason for that is the cabling system that gets put through the concrete, we need a minimum of 2 inches of cover on top and on bottom. So that's why it's a little bit thicker than the asphalt. And where, asphalt is a flexible pavement, a flexible surface. As we get through freeze and thaw cycles, that potentially could move. The concrete is tensioned to the point that if it moves, it's going to move as one single slab. You're not going to have the center of the court, potentially heaving and popping where the corners stay where it is. It's essentially that slab, if it moves, it's going to move as one single. So basically you have, if we have 4 courts here, you have 4 single slabs that are moving separately where, the asphalt, the part of the issues we have is, when you go through those freeze thaw cycles, as that asphalt expands, contracts, moves around, eventually that cracking occurs, and that's where you start seeing failure in the asphalt. Just to piggyback a few answers to some of the financial questions as we're looking at this. So I think Stacy mentioned one of the items. The reason we start with the 25-year life cycle is because that's the warranty for the post-tension concrete. We do believe this is going to last a lot longer than 25 years, but 25 is about what they warrant. And looking back, there really aren't a lot of post-tension concrete courts that have lasted longer than that 25 years. So it's harder for them to say, we know there's courts out there that are 30, 40, 50 years out. So from a planning perspective, we've looked at these estimates and said, all right, there's a 25-year warranty on the post-tension. These costs that show the 2.36, this assumes 25 years down the road, you're going to have to redo that post-tension court. Hopefully that is not the case, but just from a planning perspective and a cost perspective, that's why that number is so high. When we look at the asphalt, we assume over that 25-year span, you're going to probably repave that twice. So that asphalt is going to be put down 3 times over the 25 years, potentially, a 4th right after that 25, where the post-tension has 1 reinstallation at the 25-year. Based on those numbers, we've added about 4% escalation each year. So these numbers aren't assuming today's numbers. These assume 4% escalation over that 25-year span. So that looks at what we think those costs may be down the road 25 years.
John, what do you get from an installation company for labor and materials on the asphalt? I know we've got 25 years on the other, but will they do a year, 2 years, or what? How are you covered?
Usually it's 1 year for the asphalt courts, and it's a 3-year on the surfacing. So if the acrylic surfacing fails due to excessive fading or something deliberately with just the surfacing, that's covered over 3 years. The asphalt is covered under the 1-year warranty for the full construction project. So if you get into a situation where year 2, we start to see some cracking in the asphalt, that's technically going to be outside their warranty. And that cracking, if that affects the surfacing warranty isn't necessarily covered if the substrate is failing. So from a warranty standpoint, you have a lot more assurance that if issues occur with the post-tension, they're covered a lot more than they are with that 1-year warranty for the asphalt. And unfortunately, as tight as we do our specifications for asphalt, typically we ask for a virgin mix of the top course for the asphalt. Most times when you're doing sidewalks and roadways, Massachusetts DOT allows a percentage of recycled asphalt product in that asphalt. If we're doing asphalt courts, we'll do a virgin mix because we don't want any recycled product, because you can get iron oxide and other materials in that asphalt that could potentially fail the court. So even though we do the best we can to make the asphalt spec as tight as possible, if it's a poor install, that's not evident during the construction, and we start to see, failing, pretty soon. Those are the risks that we could see with the asphalt. Not to say asphalt jobs aren't done appropriately and done well. We do a lot of work with the town of Belmont. They typically like to do asphalt courts because they budget their projects, particularly where they say, hey, we know 10 years, 11 years down the road, we're just going to put this right on the dock and redo it. So, I think asphalt, if done well, can certainly perform well over a period of time. Post-tension, we're finding, though, with the heavy premium, does give you more assurances, and over the long span of time should perform better than the asphalt from a maintenance standpoint.
Anyone else? Laura?
Yes, and maybe this is my fault, I might be ignorant on this, but do we have a comparison of the estimated costs from last year's approval? I know it was just a design phase, but to your earlier point, to these costs, so we can see where I know there are 4 more additional courts, but what are the other areas where the cost increased? Looks like it went from 1.5 to 2.6 million,
Before additional costs.
right?
The major difference is the ad alt for the post tension. So the original high number was 1.5, which is right around the same amount. If we stick with the asphalt, and then the additional money of about $1 million is for the post tension concrete.
So the post-tension concrete wasn't in play last time.
It wasn't, when I first came to you, it wasn't becoming the norm. It's now becoming more and more popular because of the low maintenance value. So when I first brought it, it wasn't on my radar. Since then, it's definitely increased, and the towns around us, Weston, I believe, Wellesley, Weymouth, a lot of towns are moving towards it. And that's why we put it as an ad alt. So it was an
Sorry,
option, it wasn't a
ad alt.
requirement.
What does add?
It says add
Alternative.
alternate.
Oh, so it's an alternative, so it's not part of the base bid.
I got it. Oh, right there. Okay,
So we
sorry.
can basically pick and choose what we want to do. So there's the base bid of the 8 courts with asphalt, and then if we wanted to add the post tension concrete, then we could do that. Similar with the lights.
So if I could ask what I think Laura might be referring to, you didn't have a breakout of cost first time you came when you were looking for the 500 to 1.5 million dollars. Did you have a cost estimate like this?
We did not have a cost estimate like this, no. We reached out to some vendors for the cost estimate, and at the time for asphalt, they were averaging about $175,000 per court. And that was the range of the 500 to the 1.5. So it was starting at 4 and jumping up to 8.
Okay. Any other alternative funding mechanisms besides CPC?
It is on the capital improvement plan for the town, certainly. But I think, and maybe Cecilia can confirm, I believe it's also pending CPC funding.
Yeah, so in the capital plan, as presented to the select board for this specific one, the town is looking to fund part of it and looking for $1,440,000 from CPC funding. And that is assuming the full $2.6 million
Is
project.
that half, 50%, or how did the 1.4 million come up with there?
I don't know how, I think it's based on what the town can fund, so the town is looking to fund $1,149,196 and have CPC fund $1,440,000.
Oh, so we're not being asked for the whole 2.6.
That's correct, yeah.
Is that on the application?
No, so this came out after the application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's.
So the request is
that's a
actually
big change.
1.4
Yeah.
million
Yeah.
and change.
Okay. Okay, and just a general question, I know that in Newton, Stacy, some of the playground projects, some of the apparatus, some of the fields are sponsored by private sponsors. You know, corporations, local companies, do we ever pursue that here in Needham, looking for outside sources of funding that aren't from town or CPC funds?
As far as I know, looking through some of the documents in my office, it's never been something that the town has pursued. And I don't know the bylaws off the top of my head, but there are specific requirements for like naming fields and sponsoring and, but no, the answer to your question, Laura, is we've never actually pursued it.
I'm just wondering if it might make sense, I know Newton is a city and it's different and all of that, but to talk to someone in their park and rec department to just see how that works with them, just a thought.
Dave?
What about the Field of Dreams? Wasn't that sponsored by non-town?
That was a donation.
Yeah,
donation?
that was money raised with an entire group.
Not sponsors.
No.
Okay.
Not sponsored,
Yeah,
it was
there's a
donation.
bunch of legal requirements that come along with a private public sponsorship that we would have to talk with the town manager and the finance director and the select board before we could make a decision in that way.
'Cause I would imagine there'd be some corporate sponsors who would love to have their name all over some park benches and, you know, bleachers and whatnot, but maybe it's, I'm not sure how it works, so just a thought.
Good thinking. Anyone else? Jean.
Yes. There was a question about how many courts at Mills Field or Newman or Newman are being used now? And the answer said all, but how many actually are there that are being used? What's the number?
8. So we have 4 courts at Mills and 4 courts at Newman, and because the high school teams cannot use any of the courts at the high school, they use all of our other courts during their
Oh.
spring season.
So it's 4, so it's 8 now.
It
that
is
are being
currently 8.
used. Uh-huh.
But there are
okay.
2 separate places, so if
Okay.
there's a tournament, it's taking place in 2 separate locations.
We cannot actually host a high school tournament because you need to have 5 courts in the same location in order to host a tournament. So we don't host any postseason tournaments at all.
Got it.
And Stacy, you said the Park and Recreation Commission approved this at a recent meeting. But what about the school committee? This is,
No, not the project, the
option.
The option.
The design options. There were like 3 or 4 different places where the courts,
oh, yes.
where the other 4 courts would lay out.
And I wanted
That's
to
what
ask
we-
about that too, because, well, let me veer off into that, because in the packet that we received, it said the preferred office option was the one where the courts were at the bottom, were closer to the parking lot, but you didn't even present that. Have you changed your mind?
They tilted them. I hear-
So it's been recently updated to incorporate the shade structure. And so I'll let John speak more to it, but we were able to turn the court slightly
Yeah,
to
that's
to
preferred,
stay out of the
but-
25-foot zone.
Right, excuse me, I'm being talked to over here, so I was responding. I think if you summarize that, what was presented as option 2 preferred now is no longer preferred. Is that correct, Stacy?
That is correct. So in order to incorporate a little bit more space between the courts as well as the shade structure, John and the team were able to turn the court slightly and get them flush and still stay out of the 25-foot rear setback.
Okay, okay, that's good. But on approving the design, then what Park and Rec was approving was the design. But what is the role of the school department or the school committee? This is their property and it's primarily for the high school use. Don't they have a role to play?
They do, and we will certainly go speak with the school committee. I mean, athletic department is also supportive of this project and these options. And I will present to the school committee. The courts are governed by the Park and Rec department, so actually they hold the ability, I believe. And I know Chris is in the room, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is actually under the commission to vote the project. But we always get the support. We always like to work with our schools so that they are also in support.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I like to see that if it's a school department land, the school department should at least, the school committee should at least say, yes, we want this project. And as a formality.
I agree, as Stacy has said, and I apologize.
Chris,
Thank you very much for recognizing, Mr. Chair. Yes, when speaking with the high school, with the athletic director, because there were, as you said, primarily the proponents for this, that they, were as part of the conversation and the design, but of course, we would always get the, approval of the school committee with being on school property, but it is governed by the Park and Rec Commission, so we would work in conjunction with all 3.
Okay, good. That was another question, and but that leads me to I should know the answer to this, but I don't. What department will actually supervise and put out the contract and all that? Will that be the DPW or the school department?
We usually work in conjunction with the DPW when we're bidding out our construction projects. So we'll work with the engineering department and the TPW department to bid it out.
But the leading agency in doing this will be Park and Rec, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, just want to know. And the question on options 1 and 2 was answered, so, okay, thank you.
Stacy, there are a number of trees between the existing 4 courts and the proposed new 4. Those are going to be maintained, they're going to be kept, is that right?
John, you want to take that one?
The reason I say
Yes.
this, people are very sensitive about decimating trees, and they want to do the best they can to keep things as is if possible.
Yeah, so I think the reality is some of those trees will have to be removed, and I don't think cut down. I think we'll look to potentially replant them around the facility. The one thing that this plan is lacking is landscape design. We're still working on spatial planning to make sure the courts work themselves. But one of the next steps is we're going to start looking at landscaping as well to see if there's areas we can add some trees, add some shrubs. To make this a little more of a landscaped area, but also being mindful that we want to make sure it's an area that can get maintained, and we don't want to put too much maintenance on the staff that's going to maintain this area. One thing, again, as we've looked at the shade structure, try and maximize the space for the 8 courts, we're also respecting, on the lower end of the page, the benches and the monuments down here as well. So as we're sort of constrained, if we were to try to work these courts around those trees in there, I think we would be hard pressed to get those 8 courts in there. But certainly we've talked to DPW, we met earlier this week about the potential of, at least if we can remove those and replant them elsewhere, and then, potentially supplement the site with some additional landscaping as well.
I have a couple of questions.
Rich.
This is no order. I'm just leafing through the presentation where I wrote them down here. On the question of the setbacks for the existing courts where they're encroaching on the 25-foot setback, since you're tearing everything out and doing it over again, do you anticipate that there might be a site plan review issue with the planning board saying you should move them outside of the setback?
So we certainly will have to file an amendment for the special permit that the school currently has through the planning board. I think when we look at those 4 courts, I think there's an argument that those are being replaced in kind as a maintenance project, similar to the project you talked about previously with the fencing. If they do ask us for an alternatives analysis to try to get those outside that setback, the difficulty in doing that is we're going to get into the parking lot and doing some other things with the site itself. I know early on, we talked about that a little bit. And we know parking is sort of a premium up at the school as well. So any parking we would lose might be looked at unfavorably. So I think, once we have developed this plan a little bit more, we're certainly going to be filing with the planning board. But we may also discuss with the planning department as well, just to make sure that if they do think there's some issues, we can sort of get in front of it so that we can alleviate once we get into our public hearings.
Okay, thank you. And the second question on that slide, Maureen and Joe and I all did a site visit, so you wouldn't see it unless you were there, but there's about a 5 or 10 foot retaining wall and drop off, to the top of the picture that we're looking at right now, to the neighbor's backyard behind. And have you evaluated that retaining wall and confirmed that it's like in good shape and it's not gonna, something bad is gonna happen when you start digging down 3 or 4 feet and redoing the courts, whatever surface you wind up putting in?
Sure. Yeah. So we are aware of that wall back there. We do have the drawings from when it was previously installed. There's a healthy space between the courts now and the wall. I think it's about 5 or so feet in there. So I think based on the demo and what we're looking to propose, we don't think there's going to be an issue. However, we're going to look at that a little bit further just to make sure that there's no issues we foresee. If there is something, we'll take a look at that.
Okay.
Rick, can I just jump off of that
Sure.
question for a second? Is there a contingency built into this budget? I don't.
Yes,
think it's-
there is. So when you look, so on this cost opinion, the construction subtotal right here of the call it 1.2, just below the 1.2. We currently have a 20% construction design contingency of around $237,000.
Great,
Um,
thank you.
So again, as I noted, we're just starting the stormwater design right now. So we've made a few assumptions in this base bid for things we know we're going to have some channel drains and some, some catch basins and things like that. But I think once we do the stormwater design, some of that contingency will be, eaten up. We obviously, once we are in construction, will want to have a percentage of contingency, because no matter how well we design the drawings and make assumptions, you always run into something during construction. So hopefully we'll identify what that appropriate percentage is. At alternate 1 and 2, the post tension, the tennis court, those also in those line items, there's about 10% contingency in both of those as well. So even though the post tension at alternate is around 1.46, the actual cost is less than $1 million, because we've assumed some contingency on top of that for that line item.
Thank you. Sorry, Reg.
No worries. That's very good follow-on question. So, next one is, has there been any neighbor meetings about this now that you got the, about this plan? So we taking public, input. I'm thinking particularly about the neighbors on the left side of next to the new courts. And I think that they're Rosemary Street, is that right? Is that the right street it is? Yeah.
Yep.
And, what's the status of getting their, input?
We will definitely be reaching out to the neighbors, certainly, for, as we move forward with the planning department and any other requirements permitting we might need. But also we will be inviting them to share their concerns or comments or with us in a public meeting. Probably at one of our commission meetings, we'll offer some time for people to come in, review the design, talk about the project, and ask any questions.
If we go with this recommendation, would that take place before our public hearing in mid-March? Or because as opposed to having them come there and maybe complain to us for the first time, that would maybe not what we want.
Yeah, so the Park and Recreation Commission meets twice a month, typically the second and the fourth Monday, so we will slot it in before March. If we are approved for this recommendation.
And I'm just thinking, there were some, on the project specific questions, there were some attachment referred in the answer that didn't come through as attachments, and the stuff that was sent out by Lauren. So, that can be sent to us afterwards if that's.
Yeah, if you send me and Lauren the list of what documents you're referring to, we can make sure that we get them from Stacy, or if we haven't already.
All right, those are my questions.
Reg, in the email from Lauren, there were 5 attachments. I don't know.
I printed them all out, but I didn't find.
They're not the ones you're looking for.
Yeah,
Okay.
there are definitely some attachments,
Okay.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Jim?
What would be the cost savings? I know there's a lot of fixed costs if you reduced it to 6 courts, because I know people probably want to know that at some point.
I would have to take a look at that. I don't want to throw a number out offhand. I would, if we just, in discussion purposes, line item number 3 is the renovated tennis courts, so those are the existing, and then item 4 is the new tennis courts. So the new tennis courts are around $400,000. Preliminarily, if we went down to 6, we're maybe saving, $200,000 on that line item, which obviously affects some of the numbers below. But I certainly can do an updated estimate to show the cost of 6 courts versus 8. I don't want, just in case there's some numbers that may change that I'm not aware of now, I don't want to dead set say it's a certain number, but preliminarily, maybe a $200,000-$300,000, something in that range.
Thanks.
May I ask a follow-on on that? Why wouldn't it be 2/3 of what the numbers we have there, roughly speaking?
Because as well.
6/8.
Don't work like that.
Doesn't work like that. Okay.
Because half the courts are renovating the existing and half are
And a
adding.
lot of the
new.
costs are fixed, the whole
Fair enough.
project.
No, I understand. Thank you. That's right. 4 renovated and 2
Brand
Brand new, yeah.
Yeah,
To Oracle.
but that would be good to have an idea of that.
There were some other questions throughout this presentation that were raised by the committee members. Do we have what those questions are that we could get answers to? I don't know, Cecilia, did you take down any notes on that?
On,
People asked some questions about,
I took some, that I can definitely follow up with, but if you have anything that you don't feel was answered in response, I would definitely forward it to me and Lauren, just so I don't miss anything. 'Cause I
Okay.
was taking notes, but I'd rather make sure I
Okay.
got them all.
Well,
okay,
definitely if there's attachments to.
Yeah.
follow up
I have mine in chicken scratches, I can send them on. If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Since we have new members here, it is not uncommon coming out of each one of these presentations that an additional set of questions get asked. And then it's an addendum to the, current set, it's another addendum that the proponent can come, or the proposed applicant can, come back and get that back to us.
so I think what we've done in the past, if you still have further questions, compose them for them to Cecilia. She'll get them out to the applicants and we'll get an answer before we discuss for funding.
Certainly.
Okay, anything else, anyone? Stacy, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you,
See you, Chris. Have a good one.
See you, Chris.
Before we get on to the approval of the minutes, you want to add anything, Laura? Are you okay with?
No, this has been really good.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right,
No, I'm-
jump in.
No, I'm good, thank you.
The next time we meet, we will be discussing the Needham Housing Authority Linden Chambers project, which is, as you all know, certainly much more complex and challenging than the two we faced tonight. So I would just remind everyone, I'm gonna have to do it again. Review the due diligence questions and responses, and get ready for a very important presentation next week. No pressure in
2 weeks.
Yes. You'll be ready next week.
Now it's
Well,
under
Red?
pressure. We thought you
Actually,
were
if I may, we are starting to work on the presentation, obviously, it's a biggie, and if it's okay, if anybody has any guidance, there's so much territory to cover. And, we have, our budgeted, 2 hours or less, so
Mhm.
is there any particular area that anybody wants to focus on?
The financing,
The financing?
yeah, that's,
It's
I
very
look over,
complex.
So,
because it's like,
I mean,
we're asked for a small amount of money, and the project is for a large amount of money.
Yeah.
so
just that.
one is financing, yeah,
One of the answers to one of the questions, like I looked at there was like about 40 questions.
yes,
Half were from Teacher,
Teacher.
half were from Emily, and there were a couple from the committee. And one of the ones from the committee, I thought was really a great question. And I think you should elaborate on the answer, which is, how much money of the 5 million or so that you're asking for is really at risk? Because when I first read the answer, it sounded like there was only about 500,000 that was at risk, and the
That's
rest.
correct.
And, I know, I wasn't here like 2 years ago, but like last year, one of the biggest issues that was brought up by people, maybe even, help, push the thing back was, this is so risky for the town, putting all this money up. Which, back last year was less money, it was like, 1.3 million or something like that. It's so risky for the town shouldn't be
Yeah,
doing that.
that's also correct.
Yeah.
Why is it all of a sudden not as risky is the
Well,
question, yeah.
No, I'll let the past be the past. The question is, what is the risk? What is the financial risk? What is the risk quantitatively, and then what is?
So we'll
what is
definitely get into
The
that.
probability. That's a
Yeah.
harder thing to answer, what's the probability of this
actually-
getting funded or not? I mean, in the first year versus.
We'll get into it,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the fact that only 10% of the ask is, in a high risk.
It's
or higher-
counterintuitive.
Higher risk,
Yeah,
was kind of revealing to me and, made me,
give me the list of things like that, because it's 40 pages. We tried to explain it, but it's a lot.
The other comment I have, which I won't elaborate on, is your contingency is too low.
Okay,
I mean, are these things that should go through Cecilia and Lauren?
Well, hopefully we'll get a response from Cecilia soon. She'll be at the next meeting, right?
From Lauren?
Lauren,
Oh, not Lauren, I mean,
Emily?
I mean,
Oh, Emily.
Emily.
Yeah.
Emily.
Emily Ackenberg, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's another question I had. In fact, I sent you an email asking about, not necessarily input from Emily, but input from T-Chalk, how is that gonna be in writing? Is it gonna be another meeting? How are we gonna get input there? Because,
I think for Emily, she's waiting on more input or to provide more detailed input for the committee until she's still reviewing the due diligence responses. And wants to see the presentation is the plan. So, and instead of giving kind of like a half ready, half thought out process, she wants to get as much information as possible before she presents it. And then with T-Chalk, it's really, I think, when you guys
yeah.
want.
I mean,
And I don't think,
I'm,
I don't think we're getting anything in writing from T-Chalk. I think we're getting advice as an advisory committee. But we
So-
haven't gotten it yet, you're right. It's
no, what does that mean? I mean, they're gonna sit down and like, if you look at the schedule now, there's like a coordination meeting with the the finance committee and with the select board, or maybe that's gonna be together. But does that mean there's gonna be another one with T-Chalk?
well, T-Chalk is meeting next Tuesday, but they don't have this on the agenda.
Yeah, I would prefer that they give us something in writing,
They don't have a schedule, or they got their presentation in November, but that's all.
Yeah, I mean, because,
I can ask
Yeah, we don't-
our liaison, Peter,
yeah,
whether in fact there's a plan to
Is
give
there
something in writing.
I mean, this is something
Or-
everybody's talking about, is something that,
Are they
Yes.
gonna meet with us after? I'm assuming they're gonna probably see the meeting with Emily and all of that. Do we have a plan to have a meeting with them in their advisory capacity, or how do we get their feedback, right? Is that
no,
what
that's my question.
Do you know?
I guess it's how you guys would like to request it. They're really here to provide you guys the guidance and the input that you're looking for. I would say along the lines of Emily, I don't think that they would be ready to provide anything until
After
the presentation is done to the
course.
CPC and they have the due diligence questions as
Okay.
well. They're in it the
So
same.
maybe after that, we can maybe set up
Yeah.
a
But
meeting with them.
they've already had a presentation similar.
Not like
Okay.
the 40 pages of
It's
detailed
dated,
diligence.
right?
They've
Right,
had a
but
very
they-
high
but
level.
They already have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had one in November.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why they couldn't be opining.
Do they have the due diligence questions, teacher?
No, I'm waiting until basically they're available to the public and then I will forward them.
So they
Okay.
need that. They need
I mean,
that.
what I would want to avoid is them coming in at the last minute.
Yeah.
But they should have all the information.
Yeah.
Before they,
But Emily's attending next time, as I think somebody said.
She is.
Yeah.
Peter is also.
and she has both the due diligence questions and the T-Chalk follow-up questions. So
Right.
that'll be a really good meeting. I'm sure they're gonna be
Well,
watching.
they're all appended in one big thing. All the T-Chalk questions
Yeah.
got added to the end of our questions, like David said.
So
you
I'm
know.
guessing the T-Chalk members are gonna watch that meeting.
But it's
nobody
not on
knows.
the agenda next time. They're meeting about once a month.
I would just like to see some more clarity about what the interface is between this.
Anyway,
I
for
talked
our
with-
committee, sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I'm just saying, I talked with Peter today, and they have only last week gotten that charge, exactly who they are, what they're supposed to do, what the expectations, so they have not had a lot of time
They've had
to
two
put their act
meetings.
together.
Peter's an attendee, if you want to ask him.
Well, that's not really on our agenda, right? I
Well,
don't-
let's
Yeah.
No,
Well, just what does the committee want to hear from us? Anything else? Like,
can we do this, Reg, in like
Let-
an email format
any kind of format as long
rather
as
than
it's.
right now? Because I
soon.
Yeah.
mean, we don't wanna.
I didn't
this
mean to
could
get
go
people
into
off the
Perpetuity,
track.
right?
But what, all I'm saying is we're doing it now, so if you can send an email to Cecilia,
Is
because you
that
can't do
appropriate,
it directly.
Cecilia?
Yeah, you can definitely.
And she'll
Okay.
package up and get it to us before the end of the week, if that's possible.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Perfect.
And Dave mentioned the planning board, and the planning board has been quite busy, working with the planning director to draft the zoning amendments that will be before town meeting, in the spring, in May. The draft was reviewed last meeting, and now the comments are being incorporated in a redraft, which presumably will be approved by the planning board for submission, at its meeting next Tuesday for submission to the select board. So that's moving forward.
That's great.
All right, let's get back on our agenda here, which is the approval of the minutes of 12/13/23. I trust everyone has had a chance to review them. Well done.
And of course, I'm reminded, when people said, oh, but you've seen the town council eligibility determination, there it is, and I read it very carefully.
You knew you'd read it,
It's
yeah.
all right there.
All right, any questions or comments or corrections
I don't think
on the
so.
minutes?
The only thing I saw was under the CPC, really minor, under CPC code of conduct, I think, for the motion, we did the vote, it said motion carries 5-0, but, Reg voted nay, so I think it would be 5-1, right?
That's right.
Okay,
That's all I saw.
thank you, Maureen. Any other corrections? Hearing none. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
any discussion? All those in favor by a roll call vote. Laura,
yes.
Dave?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Maureen?
Aye.
Jean?
I,
Reg?
Aye.
And the co-chair votes aye as well. Minutes pass. All right, any other item that we have not discussed that we can discuss now?
Any update from the moderator?
No update. Not heard. I think we're gonna be flying with 7 of us.
Well, we have 7 good people, so that's good.
It is what it
Right?
is.
Yeah,
Yep.
But we still, we
Wish I
need 5
could.
I
votes
mean,
for.
we still need 2 more people. that's
We do,
acknowledged.
we do,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
and it's still 5 for a quorum.
Right, and 5 for.
Yeah,
So nobody
To
can
pass.
get sick
Yeah.
or go away or do anything.
Yeah, but you have,
Until
you
town
have, you
meeting's
have
over.
Zoom
No,
though.
I'm fine. It just is a precaution because I was
I've
definitely.
seen you in person actually for a while.
That's
It's
right.
really nice.
You
to have you
don't
here.
see all of me, only half of me, but
Well,
here I am.
That's,
the mascot, at
100%.
first I'm looking over saying,
Who is that?
who's that strange person?
All right, hearing nothing.
Hearing, is that confirmed for March 13th? Do we have that as definite, or is that? Not
no,
definite.
so
It's
it's,
a ring.
it's the tentative that we scheduled it on, but it's not public, we need to post it 2 weeks in advance.
Okay.
So any changes just need to happen before 2 weeks,
Okay.
but if you guys all wanted to do a different day, then that's definitely possible.
Any other comments? All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Second, okay, no discussion on that, I don't imagine. All right, roll call vote again. Laura,
Yes.
Dave,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Jean,
I.
Reg,
Aye.
co-chair, aye.
You're adjourned.
Motion passes, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.